Well, hey everyone, and welcome to another Beer 30 webinar. My name is Aaron Gore. I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for the Fifth Ingredient and the Vice President of the American Craft Beer Hall of Fame. Before we get started, I do want to do a couple of housekeeping items. So, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to everybody tuning in today. Really appreciate you being on here. And for anybody who does need to drop off early or who's coming in late, we are going to have the recorded version of this up on the Fifth Ingredients YouTube channel and being sent to anybody who registered. But outside of that, if you do have any sort of comments or questions, please don't hesitate to drop them into the chat. We just ask that everyone keeps their microphones muted and their screens off for the duration of the webinar. But beyond that, this is Moving Targets. And today we're going to be talking about how to go about strategic decision making during times of great uncertainty. And, I feel like that's something that's probably on a lot of folks' minds around the industry now. It's no secret that things are more uncertain than they've been in quite some time. And I couldn't be more excited to have our guests on today, a couple of people who are experts in the field, experts on that exact topic. But I don't want to go ahead and put words in their mouth. I don't want to go ahead and heap any more laudations on them than I would otherwise. So, Jeremy, Ryan, I would love for y'all to be able to just introduce yourself. So, Ryan, go ahead and kick us off. Tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do, and what your favorite pizza topping is.
Pizza topping. That's a good one. Well, I'm Ryan Halleman, the CEO of Apex Group 360. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've been out here for officially 1 year now. Just hit my year mark. A little about Apex. We're a group consulting company. Someone actually gave me a great description when I was describing the company the other day. It was think of us like think of me like a general contractor for building a house, but as opposed to building a house, you're building a beverage brand. So you may not need an electrician, a plumber, a carpenter, but you need someone to manage marketing, supply chain, operations, data. We've got Jeremy over here. He's a part of the Apex Group family. I'll let him talk about what he does. I came from the beer industry. I was a COO for Ninkasi Brewing out in Eugene, Oregon, for about 6.5 years. I was there. I love the beer industry. Started in supply chain, been doing that for 16 years now. It's a passion, something I love doing. So I'm excited about this. Excited about this talk. I love talking shop. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a good time.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. And thanks again for being here. Jeremy, how about yourself? Introduce yourself to the world. Same questions. Who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? And favorite pizza topping.
Pizza topping.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you ruined it, Ryan. We had a great icebreaker, and it's ruined forever.
I'll write that down so I don't forget. My name is Jeremy Carney. I'm out of small town of Paso Robles, California, a small but mighty town. I really specialize in data and analytics. I have about 20 years of experience working in more of the corporate space, working with data. But over the last 2 years, I've been really focused on craft breweries. So just trying to help breweries connect to all the different systems that they have data, bring it into a single spot, and then display it for them in interactive dashboards. So I think this topic we're going to be getting in today is certainly not that I have all the answers in this space, but I think it really is a nice way to kind of lean into how data can maybe help in some of these times of uncertainty to help breweries run really smarter businesses and be able to take advantage of some of these opportunities that are still going to be out there. And I'm going to say right now, for my favorite pizza topping, I'm going to go a little different than usual. I've been doing a lot of jalapenos on my pizza just to spice it up a little bit. Maybe that's a California thing also, because we have so much Mexican food influence out here. But that's what I've been getting recently.
Spicy food is always the right answer, so you'll hear no criticism out of me on that front. you know, as much as folks did come out here to learn more about, you and I and Ryan, all of us together, I'm sure at a certain point, they'd like to actually learn something that they can use within their own businesses, and that's exactly what we are here to talk about today. So we're going to be talking about that strategic decision-making process, how that relates to a current uncertain environment. But before I kind of turn over to some questions, some conversation with yourselves, I do want to set the table a little bit, lay the foundation a bit on exactly what we're talking about. Because, it is a very uncertain time, and we've seen a lot more causes for that uncertainty pop up here recently. This year it's been all over the news. Tariffs have been on one day, off another, on different places, changing up and down. But that's just one piece of the puzzle because uncertainty's been climbing in the craft beer environment for the last few years. We have more competition than we have ever had before, and for the first time in a long time, we've actually seen the total number of breweries even start to take a bit of a hit, and things have gotten more competitive than they've ever gotten in the past as well. The market's maturing, it's evolving, it's changing, and the structure of it has really changed as well. And that includes with things outside of beer. We've seen cannabis and cannabis in general, as legalization has started to roll out, has become a serious disruptor. And it feels like every other week we're starting to see new changes regarding novel types of beverage, even outside that cannabis space. Craft cocktails, hard seltzers, hop waters, a whole variety of things that are encroaching on areas that were traditionally beer's territory. And that means that that environment and that means that that landscape is changing pretty constantly as well. So a couple of things that we're going to talk about today are really going to be built on this idea that, even though decision making has never been easy in this industry, we're running a manufacturing business spot welded to a hospitality business that's spot welded to a wholesale and distribution business. That's not an easy circle to square, but even within that environment, and even as things have become more uncertain, that doesn't mean that there's not opportunity still to be found. And that doesn't mean that there's not still a way of going about things that can mitigate your risk and let you take advantage of those opportunities instead of feeling like you're always on your back foot. So before we start diving into what and how, a couple of the things that you really need in order to be able to get started on strategic decision making more generally. The first is going to be good data. Actually being able to understand your business and having good context. So the ability to really take that information and settle that squarely within your business and within the environment you're moving in. And you need to have a good understanding of the risks and the opportunities that are out there, as well as what levers, what things you can actually control versus what your constraints are, the things that you really can't. And that means that more than ever, it's important that you do invest in the right tools, the right people, make sure that you're being very careful with your cash and being extremely nimble and also keeping a real tight focus on what your priorities are. Because at the end of the day, those priorities are going to set the tone for every decision you make from there. Now, we are going to be using a couple of tools to really drive into the importance of data for illustrative purposes, Beer 30 being the most important one. We have a full command center. It's fully integrated into Beer 30, and it's absolutely free to any of our customers. One single source of truth. I actually worked in conjunction with Jeremy in order to build it, make sure that we were able to let you drive down into your data as much as possible. But whatever tool you are using, it's still important to make sure that you have access to all the data that you need, that you're able to keep your sources of truth as small as possible so you have fewer needs to reconcile data or less drift. You know that you're comparing apples to apples instead of apples to oranges, and make sure that that data is simple and simple enough to use, which is critical, but also comprehensive enough to be of value. You know, simple doesn't necessarily mean that it's not complex. It just means that it's not complicated. Because at the end of the day, you're probably wearing 1,000 hats and you're probably managing a lot of the business yourself. So having data easy to access and easy to use is critical for you being able to use it to actually go about your job. And as we dive into that command center, as we dive into some of the other tools, some of the other processes, and even dive outside of those into other areas of your business, we just want you to keep in mind that now more than ever is the time where treating your business like a business is the key. But with that in mind, as we do dive into that larger topic of strategic decision making, what does that even really mean? And Ryan, I'd love for you to kick us off because this is really kind of core to your business at Apex Group 360. What is strategic decision making and kind of how does that play into the life of a brewery?
Well, for me, in my experience, I've seen like both sides of the table, right? I've been on the side of the table where when I started in the brewing industry, I was in purchasing, I was purchasing manager, managing supply chain. So that strategic planning, I think, changed a little bit from when I went from that side of the table to the executive side as the COO. So in the beginning, you're taking the data you have, you're taking the information you have, the forecast, the planning, all that, and you're making decisions based around scale. If you can scale, I mean, it's all cost driven. So you're trying to get the best possible outcome out of whatever you're buying out there. And having the information at your fingertips is crucial. I've worked with good ERPs and I've worked with bad ERP systems in the past. I've worked with good data and bad data. So I think having it accessible to you in a way that's understandable and actionable at that level was super important. When I flipped over to the executive side and you're looking at a profit and loss statement constantly, and you're looking at trying to grow the business and looking at it from a perspective of not only is what I'm purchasing or what the purchasing team that I'm still overseeing is doing on a daily basis, but also what's labor costs, what's electricity costs, what's water, what's there's so much that goes into it. And making those strategic decisions based on what you have in front of you, it's it's life or death to a brewery. I mean, if you've got to make those decisions almost on the fly at sometimes, but having the information in front of you is super critical.
Absolutely. And that's really one of the things that I'd like to drive home to anybody watching this is that strategic decision making sounds really big and it sounds really heady. And all we're really talking about is being able to make smarter decisions for your business. Because for a lot of us, we got into this because we love beer. We got into this because we love people. And I understand that. That passion's critical. That's what drives our industry. But these are businesses. And it's not just about us. In a lot of cases, it's about our families, it's about our colleagues, it's about our customers, but it's also about the people who work for us. And those people do depend on us to make not just reflexive decisions, but proactive decisions, smart decisions, the right decisions that are built on more than just hope as a strategy. But Ryan, one of the things that you said that really stuck with me is the importance of having that information right in front of you. So Jeremy, can you speak a little bit to the importance of being able to really visualize your data? Because I know when I say data, and believe me, anybody who's watching this, it's not going to get better from here. We're going to use the word data more times than the average episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Uh, but as you're talking about data, as you're talking about truth, which is really what data is, how do you put that into something that somebody who's got to juggle all these different aspects, who might be coming into this from an engineering background or a legal background, IT background, any number of backgrounds, how do they approach data? Because I know in their head, and a lot of their heads, in my head, you're really thinking, linear regressions and p-values and all these things that, I fell asleep during high school statistics class. I don't know about you. So how do you make this something usable?
Mhm. Yeah, great question. And a lot of it, I guess, starts with breweries produce a ton of data. Like you said in kind of your introduction, Aaron, it's not like breweries are in a single space, right? Where manufacturers, we run a supply chain, we also do retail or hospitality, we do wholesale. A lot of financial information, CRM data, right? So there's data everywhere. And a brewery team cannot be expected to know exactly what's going on in every little function of their business, right? With all this data. And even if they do know what's going on, they're not going to be able to action every single thing. So what I try to work with breweries on is really determining what's important for them and what can you action like immediately. There's going to be a lot of things, especially in this environment that we're heading into, that you can't really action in the short term. Maybe in the long term, you'd be able to take some actions today, and then maybe in the future, you can take more direct action on it. But a lot of it is just going to be, we need to focus on what's under your control, and what can we action. And it's really separating. There's going to be a lot of noise in your data, right? Because you're collecting so much of it. So it's try to get down to what is kind of the signal in there that's going to then lead your team to take a smart action. And what I try to do is do all the hard lifting of all the data kind of behind the scenes, right? There's a lot of really good systems that can combine data together, they can clean it. And then ultimately, we try to display it to people that need it in like the easiest to understand way so they can look at it really quick in like a minute or less and know exactly what they need to either drill into more, maybe to find the root cause of something, or talk to their team about. But really, we want to lead people to be able to take those smart actions and allow people to do what they're good at, which is creative problem solving, right? Instead of just moving numbers around on the spreadsheet, is kind of how I think about data in a space like this.
Well, and I love that, and I love the way that you put that as well. One of my favorite anecdotes, once upon a time when I was younger and much cooler and was a full-time consultant as well, I had a client who I was talking to, and we were trying to drive into what his core concerns were, the biggest challenges that he had, and he was working on his laptop, and he said, I got into this industry because I wanted to brew great beer, and I wanted to be able to share it across the bar with customers, really share that experience with them. Turned his laptop around, and he said, instead, I'm booking freaking yoga. And I think that's really one of the key takeaways is these businesses, for as small as they are surprisingly complex, and there really is a lot of input. So, Jeremy, one of the things you said is that the data's job here isn't to take away that human element or to take away from your ability to make the decisions for your business. It's the exact opposite. We know that you know your business, but absolutely nobody can fully understand every aspect of a business this complex, that's spitting off this much information with so many moving pieces, especially now with the environment shifting so much. So, this data is there to be able to very quickly and cleanly give you the info you need to apply those same skills that made craft beer great in the first place, that nimbleness, that agility, that creative thinking to let you approach your business in the right way. But Ryan, can you speak a little bit? Because right now we're at a time in the industry where everybody's looking to cut costs, and that's absolutely understandable. Our raw material inputs are going all over the map. Malting barley is up and down like crazy right now. Aluminum is going up and down, and it's probably only going to climb from here. How does having that information in easy to present format, how does having that information in front of you help you begin the process of identifying opportunities and making some of these decisions?
So a big one is looking at how much you're purchasing just off the top, like looking at the scale of what you're buying. Because if I can go to a vendor, if I can go to any one of my vendors, and I mean, the contracting process, whether it's hops or malt, cans, cartons, whatever it may be, that in that contract, the contracting process is so important to a brewery. I know you may do it once a year, you might do it every 6 months, whatever your process is, and that's going to depend on scale too, don't get me wrong. But if you have the information in front of you and you know how much you've bought, you know what your future forecast looks like, it's just another tool in the tool belt that you can use when you're talking to the vendors. I think when you go and talk to any one of these companies you're working with, if you go in there blind and you don't have the information in front of you, I mean, it's a tough mountain to climb. I mean, you've got to have it easily accessible because they're going to ask you questions. They're going to ask you, you're going to get that like, what's your target? But they're going to ask you, what's your volume? They're going to ask you, how much are you planning on running, or how much did you run last year? What did you run in May of 2024? They're going to ask you all these questions, and having it easily visible and accessible is of utmost important. I love the data. I've always been a data guy. So being able to go and easily access it is super important when you're talking around uh especially around your pricing. And to Jeremy's point earlier, like making it one of you mentioned it, like making it simple and making it easy for all the different departments that need it to access it and understand it. Because what I was looking at isn't the same thing that finance is looking at. It ended up being a little more of that. But what the brewers are looking at is not the same thing I'm looking at. So having it easily accessible when you're talking to them about like a malt change. Hey, if I got a malt change that's going to save us 10 cents a pound, like I mean, you've got to have that information in front of you. You've got to have it to go to the brewers and to go to the vendors you're talking to. So that's critical.
Well, and I love that. And just as an example, and I'll share my screen a little bit to give you folks watching a little bit more of a hint of what we're talking about here. So, one of the things that's important to track, and one of the things I will die on this hill, is that COGS is absolutely critical to monitor. Another anecdote: when I was consulting, one of my clients was doing $4.5 million in distributed revenue a year. They were crushing it in the market, growing like crazy. Couldn't figure out why they were broke all the time. When I did a full COGS analysis, what we found out is that they were losing $1.74 a case on every single case that went out of their number one selling product. They're absolutely winning themselves to death. So, we'll get into some more prescriptive strategies for approaching an uncertain environment here in a bit. But even just on the costing side, you need to understand where your costs are going because far too often, whatever system you're using, including Beer 30, people have a tendency to just set a target and they live off of that target. And it's very easy to lose track of the fact that your costs are going to drift upwards, maybe even downwards, and being able to take advantage of that and having an understanding of the real impact on your business. So being able to understand on something like this what your actual costs are going to be across formats, if you see that the costs on your canned product is climbing like crazy, it's very easy to draw an assessment, if nothing else is, that you probably have an aluminum problem. That's an issue. You could have the same thing over time if you're talking batch to batch, being able to compare not only normalized across barrels, but also seeing how your costs are drifting between those batches. Maybe your loss is happening. Maybe you're losing a lot more on transfer than you used to, or maybe as you've changed your hopping schedule, you've actually been able to lose less to hop loss over the course of production. Maybe as you're driving into your raw materials, you're able to take a look at a list like this and see that your last purchase of two row pale, your base grain is up significantly from previous purchases, up significantly from your trend. That means that you got some digging in to do, figuring out exactly what your dependencies are. And in this case, if we're taking a look at how each of our raw materials flows into our products, you're able to really drive in and see that you have a huge amount of product that's actually dependent on you not only having two row, but your margins are going to take a huge hit across the board if you're not able to really control for those changes, or at the very least, account for them in your business model going forward. So having that data in front of you is critical for being able to drill in. And in something like that, in 2 seconds, be able to really do a root cause analysis and understand something that could have an outsized effect on whether or not you're able to make payroll at the end of the month. Having that data is key. Having the right tools to help you visualize them also really helps you do your job that much better. But it's not just about tools. You know, Jeremy, obviously your background is in building some of this visualization. Your background is in, surfacing some of this. But can you speak to some in your experience, some of the information that's most important for breweries to have to be able to have a good understanding of their business and identify opportunities and threats before they happen?
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to knowing what you can control, especially in times of uncertainty, right? There's going to be a lot that, like I kind of mentioned before, you can't control in the short term. So it's really knowing what you can control and then being able to focus on that as you make changes. So you can't be too scared to like not make any changes. So I think it's still important for people to try new innovations, make changes. Like you said, maybe you're doing a different recipe in order to reduce cost of goods sold, or you're brewing a new flavor because you think it might take off in the market. So it's still important to be able to do stuff like that. But then don't just do it and say, okay, great, we're done with that one. I'm sure it's going to work great. You really have to track what the results are. And are you, with the new beer you're making, or the new recipe where you've maybe changed some of your ingredients to go a little cheaper, are you getting both that cost of goods sold savings that you're expecting, and is your demand, staying flat or increasing? So you're not making a change that you think's going good, but then you end up shooting yourself in the foot because it's having unintended consequences. So that's why I think it's always really critical as you're making these changes to make sure you're tracking the results of them over time.
Yeah, what gets measured gets managed, and it's important to make sure that you're tracking the results, not just the plan. But speaking of the plan, Ryan, can you speak a little to forecasting? You mentioned earlier some of the conversations with wholesalers, and historically, I know for a lot of breweries, their basic strategy when it comes to producing product is they make the beer and then hope to God they can sell it. Can you speak a bit to the importance of forecasting, the importance of planning out what you're going to be brewing, and specifically how that ties in a bit to these high uncertainty and ever-changing environments like we're in today?
I'm not going to try to go down a rabbit hole too far on this one because I'll
No,
get
no, no,
lost in
please
this
do.
pretty
We've
quickly.
got 40 more minutes to fill. So.
Sure. So, I mean, the forecasting, this is a fun topic. So forecasting. So when I was the brewery, we had someone doing forecasting, and it drove pretty much everything we did, and it was pretty accurate. Almost, I mean, you're talking like it's a few barrels off, right? Like not huge amounts where there's a huge amounts of loss in the forecast. So when you're planning your production, obviously we have a planning team, we got a forecasting team, we got a production team. So the planning team is taking that forecast, and you got the purchasing team who's bringing all the materials in to match the forecast. Again, there was 96 different SKUs, I believe, in Ninkasi, something like that. So that planning piece was significant, right? And when you're looking at that many SKUs across that many formats, whether it's 12-ounce bottles, cans, 16-ounce, 19.2s, 24-ounce, it just keeps going on. Mix packs, all of the above. The forecast was like, I mean, it was called the Mecca for a reason. Like it's got a name around it. And you're looking at these tools and saying, here's the plan. We're going to put this plan to action. And the hope goes out the window because you've already done the due diligence of making sure that you know where it's going, you know what the plan is, I mean, but the brewery like that, like the distributors, like you're working with them throughout the year, there's a lot of sales there. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in the background. That plan is pretty set, and you know what's going to go out there in the market. And when you're launching something new, someone mentioned when you launch a new one, trying to look at the results, even if it's a new malt, like I mentioned earlier, like looking at the result of how much you're saving on a new launch or a new ingredient is utmost important because you don't want to be cutting yourself that $1.50 a case that you're losing on a SKU that's taken off, right? So whether you have a flagship brand and you're forecasting your flagship brand out, and you know, based on historical data over the last 5 or 6 years, you kind of know where the ramp is. Like you know where it's going to go. You know what the plan is. Is it up? Is it down? If you're planning on a downtrend, then you plan for the down. Like you don't want to make it just to make it. I remember looking at supply chain back when I took over as the director of supply chain, and I remember asking a question like, "Why are we making that?" Well, we've in the response, we've always made that much. And it's like, but why are we making that much, right? Like, what's the reason for making it? And I'm like, we need to stop. Like, I don't want to make it just to make it. That's not the answer. So it's making sure that you're precise with it and that the planning team is understanding efficiencies. And if you're going to make 500 barrels, you're making 500 barrels, you're making 360, you're making 360. Really having that the plan in place, and we'll use the data word again, and having the data to back it up is about most important when you're going through the forecast and making sure that it's spot on.
No, absolutely. And it's so easy to hear planning team and forecasting team, and for these things to really feel so much more advanced than a small brewery is able to do. And I can understand why it feels that way as well. A lot of this sounds like these large brewery approaches, but one thing I think we've done a really poor job at as an industry, and I've been doing this almost my entire adult life, is taking lessons from some of the businesses that happen to be doing it really well. And yes, I'll go on record. I don't drink much Bud Light. But by the same token, there are some things that you really can learn from some of these larger, more mature organizations that don't take away from that same spirit of innovation, that same spirit of craftsmanship that really built our neck of the industry either. So even if you don't have a forecasting team and a planning team, and at the scale you were working at Ninkasi, Ron, you needed that level. But
But it was a team of one, right? The team, I'll use team loosely because the planning team was one person. The forecasting team was one person. And they crossed over sometimes when someone was out of town. So it may seem like a huge operation, like team sounds large, but team can also, I mean, it's just it's relative, right? I mean, it could be just one
exactly.
person was a team.
Well, and there's tools that can assist as
Yeah.
well. And I know we're harping on tools, and part of the reason I harp on tools it isn't just because it's me and Jeremy's bread and butter and what pays our bills, but also because at the end of the day, the breweries who reinvest in their own businesses at a time when things are so uncertain, at a time when things are so competitive, are going to be the ones that thrive. And that can be in your product, in your beer. The things that kill breweries aren't your beer wasn't good enough. It can, but we're pretty well past that portion of the industry. And if you look at surveys of the reasons breweries close, it's very banal, very mundane reasons. It's almost always related to cash and leverage, debt. So being able to really have a good control of your business is key. And another one of the ones I harp on constantly is inventory control. Again, brewing beer and hoping to God you can sell it is not a strategy. And forecasting sounds arcane, but even if it's as simple as taking your historical data and then just adding in up or down a little bit based on seasonality or big events, that's a lot better than just hoping that that batch you're making might find a home at some point. Because the moment that you buy those raw materials to go ahead and produce a finished good, so produce some beer, you're making a bet. You're making a bet that that cash is going to return to you, at least break even, and hopefully make some level of margin for you. And ideally, you're making a bet that of all the different things you could have done with that cash, over whatever period of time, you're going to get the most out of parking it in that specific beer than you would anything else. Because at the end of the day, inventory and risk are synonyms. So one of the things we have at Beer 30, but you can do this at least in some form, even on pen and paper, is doing some level of demand planning. Taking into account what your expected sales are and using that to figure out when and how much you need to be brewing specific beers to only have on hand exactly what you need to make sure you never miss a purchase order, you never miss a sale. And we even have a material resource planner to make sure that you are only purchasing raw materials when you need to have them in hand or when you need to brew, to always have on hand the finished goods you need to always make a sales order. So, however, you're coming to that, having a process like that to keep your days on hand of inventory low, that means the amount of cash you have to tie up in inventory that may or may not code out goes down dramatically. And that can be the difference between, again, making payroll or keeping the lights on or being able to buy that new tank or make those improvements in the tap room your customers have been asking for and not being able to. So this has very real consequences for your business and isn't nearly as challenging as it seems. So whether you're investing in something like Beer 30 or a good point of sale system or Jeremy's independent services or Ryan's independent services, these pay back in dividends, not just because, yes, we would also like to eat, but also because the goal here is to let you focus on the things that only you as an owner or operator can do, because those are myriad. And the one thing that you're never going to have enough of is time. But Jeremy, I would love for you to be able to speak a little bit to uh, in an environment of high uncertainty. Can you speak a little on how to stay grounded and how to really
Mhm.
avoid some of the common pitfalls of moving in an uncertain environment?
Yeah. I think it's important to really stay true to kind of your core principles and what makes you unique as a brewery. Like we've all mentioned, it's in times of uncertainty, you need to be nimble and try some new things, but you still really need to stay grounded in like what makes you unique with your local following. You don't want to completely go and, chase the newest fad. A lot of times by the time you've chased it, you're the 10th in line, right? So you're not setting anything new. So it's probably not going to benefit you anyway. And it just took away resources from something that you could double down on how you're promoting your flagship or something. There's limited resources, and we have to, like Aaron said earlier, basically every decision is a bet, right? On what you think is going to be most successful to grow your business or to reduce costs. So while you do need to do some of that innovation work, you still really need to, I think, stay true to what some of your core principles are that sets you apart from other breweries.
Definitely.
And I think it's real, like times like this, everybody's kind of looking for that next silver bullet, right? So it makes you a little bit more likely to just, like I said, chase that new fad. And that can be really dangerous, especially as people also need to protect cash. Like Aaron said, the thing that'll make businesses go under is running out of cash, right? So in a time that might be tough, you need to just, in some cases, stay alive until things start to pick up a little bit better, and then you'll be in a better spot to expand. So it feels like as we're talking through this webinar, there's a lot of do this, but do this. And a lot of times those two things are kind of in contradiction, right? But it's really just finding the balance of what fits best for you in the current conditions.
Well, Ryan, I'd actually really like to redirect that at you a little bit because I agree, Jeremy. It's very easy to say you need to plan more, but also stay flexible, and those two things feel like they're in tension. They feel almost contradictory. But Ryan, can you speak a little to how you do balance that need to be nimble, agile, flexible, insert synonym here, and the need to also ground what you're doing in facts and in information and in proper planning?
Yeah, I can relate that to two different scenarios. I mean, obviously at the bigger brewery, like I mentioned earlier, like the team, you got the team dynamic, right? So you got a bigger group of people working through a project. So I think the grounded part of it is you've got more people looking at it. There's more eyes on it. You've got experience. You've got all the data at your fingertips. And then I can relate that to one of my smaller clients that I work with now, like moving over to the consulting space where I've got a smaller beer client. He's got he's got one SKU, right? He's got one liquid. It goes into draft and bottles, and it's a turnkey solution, like you mentioned. Like he's wearing a bunch of hats, but it's a sales and marketing hat. So all the supply chain, I mean, all that's running through Apex. So making the decisions around the ingredients to order, the packaging to order, and the amount. And if you order the wrong amount, that bet can be costly when it's a smaller brewery. So I think the ability to adapt on the fly and not chase the fad. I've seen so many companies chase the fad and chase the next big thing. And to Jeremy's point, you might be 10th in line. And even if you get lucky and you're first or second, by the time a few weeks roll around, there's 10 other ones behind you. And I mean, first to market's great, but quickly people catch up. And I think the flexibility is and being nimble is something that a lot of breweries would love to say they're all in that place. A lot of them can be. A lot of them can be super flexible and can shift on the fly because the output isn't as costly as it is for a bigger brewery. So I think taking the historical data and really like doing what you do best, the status quo is sometimes the right play. It just is the right play. And I mean, I go both ways on it. Like I think the latest and greatest is cool. It's a good it can be fun and exciting for innovation. Innovation's great. Don't get me wrong, but innovate just to innovate is also not the answer.
No, completely. And it's also important to remember that innovation doesn't have to just be product innovation. We
Right?
tend to get so caught up on looking for the next hazy IPA. And I do think it's important to call out that reference point because we've been looking for the next hazy IPA since hazy IPA was the first hazy IPA, and that was 2011. I mean, it's like kind of that running question of can you name what the second most popular fad stuffy was in the 90s after Beanie Babies? No, no one can. You know why? Because it was Beanie Babies. They're the only one in town. No matter how many people try to come up with the next Beanie Babies, it didn't matter. But you don't have to just innovate on product. Business model innovation is absolutely a part of this, and it's easy to forget that our entire industry was built on being creative. To Jeremy's point earlier, creative decision making is really the foundation of craft beer as an industry. I mean, Ken Grossman was repurposing dairy equipment for Sierra Nevada all the way back in the day, and then there was all of the rapid product related innovation that we came out with from 2004 on. But this isn't our first time doing business model innovation either. Things like self distribution really shook up what it meant to be a small brewery. Things like a taproom focused brewery, which is now the dominant model for much of the industry, was a huge business model innovation. And we tend not to look at that in the same way or valorize that in the same way that we do the next hazy IPA. But in a lot of ways, those innovations are not just critical, but probably even more important for your business. And it's also important, Ryan, just to jump on something that you said, and Jeremy, you as well. Nimbleness and planning can seem like contradictions, flexibility and planning out the future, but really they're complements because having all of the information that you need to know where you want to go is the only way that you can have the structure you need to adapt quickly and be able to respond to changing environments. If everything is chaos, then you don't have enough levers to be able to pull if something changes. The important thing is knowing when to cut bait and when you do need to make that change. And when we were talking a bit about this, gents, before we actually hopped on, I know one of the things that came up was the sunk cost fallacy. This idea that just because you've invested so much time and energy into a product, Ryan, in your case, that beer that had been always produced in this volume for no apparent reason, it's very easy to think, well, if we stop now, we're losing all that was for nothing. you spend all that anyways. All that's gone. It's already done for. So there are times when pivoting can be the best thing for you. And just because you've gone the wrong path for a long time, making that change early on when it was actually needed is the first best time to do it. But right now is the second best time to do it. So uh, be nimble and respond to those things as they're happening. But driving into uncertain markets a little more, driving into some of this uncertainty, we've talked a lot about the hazards of it. And I do think that that's a key thing for people to keep in mind. I think that's what a lot of people's focus is on. There's also opportunity in uncertain markets. So, Ryan, if you want to kind of kick us off, and Jeremy, feel free to hop in, talking a little bit about some of the opportunity that this uncertainty is creating and some of the ways that breweries are able to take advantage of.
Yeah, I think that's a tough question. That's a good one though. I like that question because there's the unknown is a scary place for anyone in business to be in. And the unknown is a it's a bad word sometimes because if you people may not trust internally, that's also a issue that can run up if you're second guessing decisions and you're not sure where you're going to go and there's no plan of action. Sorry, my dog's walking on my screen behind me. There's no plan of action around what the next steps are. That can be scary. With that being said, there's always opportunity. I'm a forever optimist. I have been for a long time. I see the best in everything, every scenario, no matter how bad it can be. There's always a silver lining. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But when things aren't at their best, you gotta. I'll go back to that nimble piece, right? You gotta be nimble. Sorry, come on, but it's
No,
live,
no.
right?
In fairness, we'd probably rather have him on the webinar, but
He'd be great. He'd jump on here and be great. Yeah, he's just hanging out. But I lost what I thought a little bit there. Sorry. I think there's always opportunity out there. You got to know where to look. You got to have the information. You got to have the data to be able to back up when you're going to make a change somewhere. Whether it's a changing a vendor, an ingredient, business plan, whatever it may be, you've got to be decisive. You can't wait around. It's a scary time, but you got to know when to jump.
Yeah, I'm seeing on the operations side recently whereas before some breweries are doing pretty good and they're needing to start to produce some more volume based on their demand, which is obviously a good problem to have these days. But people are reluctant to go out and buy a bunch of new equipment, right? Both because interest rates are high and who knows what next year is going to look like. So by not just having like that lever to, okay, let's go buy a bunch of new equipment and we'll start brewing new beer. Now they're challenging their teams to, okay, how do we just run more efficient on our current equipment, right? And it's like by taking away that easy out that maybe people had 10 years ago, it's challenging their team to become, again, like we said, creative problem solvers and leaning into some of the data that they're able to work with now. They're really able to see what efficiency are we getting by brand, when are tanks sitting empty and can we utilize them a little bit better? Can we speed up the process to get beer packaged quicker? And they're finding that, oh, actually, there was quite a bit more capacity than we really thought we had. And just by not being able to take the easy way out, it kind of forces them, but in a good way, because now they're running a healthier business because they had to find this new opportunity that maybe didn't feel like an opportunity at first, but it became that way because they were able to challenge their team to make some of these good decisions.
No, absolutely. And I am going to share a bit of a sneak preview from a presentation I'll be giving at Craft Beer Professionals Connects in Charlotte here in just a couple of weeks, focusing on but a huge inspiration for it is the idea of the adoption curve. But even removing out of this, this looks like a complex chart. But if you look at some of these sections in here, this innovation window, all this is really showing is that over time, as industries start to plateau or start to show maturity, what that really creates is also a huge amount of opportunity for people to disrupt. And I only share that to say that there's really two primary ways that breweries are able to really take advantage of a declining, maturing, or even just fast changing market. And the first is by really just executing strongly. And this is one of the reasons why you've seen a lot of regional breweries, especially the ones that are really well buttoned up, have really good relationships in wholesale, really succeed, is because they're really able to take advantage of the fact that as the whole industry is coming down, the cream's going to rise ever higher because everyone starts doubling down on the things that are most successful. And even on a micro scale, you can see this. This really just drives home the importance of focus as much as you can on some of your key accounts. Focus as much as you can on some of the things, whether it's individual SKUs or concepts or differentiators that really brought you to the dance, because those are the things that are going to become that much more important because your flexibility to experiment might have decreased, even if your ability to still be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are out there hasn't really. So it means just being more careful about where you spend your time, spend your energies, and focusing on the things that you do best. But the other side is small breweries. Again, we talk about being nimble, and some of that's nimbleness in decision making, but it's also actual nimbleness. We can move, to Ryan's point earlier, so much faster and with so much relatively lower stakes than these larger monolithic organizations that if a new prime real estate position comes up and they're just looking to get somebody in there, you're probably going to hear about it, be able to sign the deal, and be able to get a new tap room in there before Anheuser-Busch has even been aware that it existed. You're able to be at local community-driven events that are just beneath the notice or beneath the ability to really even get people to for some of those larger organizations. And even as some of your peers, and this is the part that sucks. This is the part none of us like to think about, might be seeing declines in their own business. People are still thirsty, and people are still going to be looking for the kind of experiences and the kind of community that they were used to getting out of some of those firms. So, Jeremy, to play off your point earlier about brewing equipment, what was what is the thing? What is a surprise for the turkey is not a surprise for the butcher. It's what was absolutely disastrous for a lot of people selling brew house equipment in a lot of ways created a windfall for people who are just looking to source brew house equipment. The key is to always be the butcher in that scenario and set yourself up to be able to take advantage of some of these externalities and some of these things that are going to be, yes, on the net, negative shocks to the industry, but might create opportunity the next town over because their local brewery just wasn't able to be sustainable. Might create opportunity because there's grocery shelf space now wide open, or maybe there's a huge local festival that the larger breweries have just not even been aware of, or maybe you're able to be more responsive filling taps because you're right there and can literally drive the kegs over as opposed to needing to ship them from San Diego or Chico or what have you. So finding those opportunities and being quick enough to leap on them, but understanding your core financials, your core business, the things that make your business operate. That way, you know that you're not overextending yourself is really the core of being able to do strategic planning in a highly uncertain environment. But let's go ahead and take a look. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat yet, which I'm hoping is a really good sign that we managed to nail absolutely everything spot on to start with. But controlling the controllables. We've talked a bit about the need to really understand your business. And Jeremy, I know one of the things that you're a firm believer in is really driving into what things are inside of your purview, what things can you actually impact. Can you speak a little more for how breweries are able to actually identify those things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, one thing been working with some of my breweries on recently that are definitely taproom focused, because like you mentioned earlier, a lot of, especially the smaller kind of local breweries, they're finding it's harder to win on the distribution side, so they're really becoming taproom focused. And in that case, you can't always determine how many people are going to come in your door. So in some cases, we kind of say the number of checks every day is something that's out of the control of like the specific hospitality team, right? So it's really once people are in your building, then how do you get them to spend more? And how do you upsell beer to go or merchandise to go? So when they're using the data with their taproom team, right, they're not necessarily looking at total sales because that's not something that the individual server or bartender can control. It's really when they're working, what is the average tab or what is the upsell rate? So something that person, that operator, no matter where they are in the brewery, what can they specifically control control, and then be able to give them the data to help them be successful to do something.
Absolutely. And Ryan, can you speak a little more on that as well? Just really refining in on what people are able to control within their own business and how to really bring that into focus.
Yeah, I think with bigger breweries and smaller breweries, I think the labor piece is a big one that they can control. I think the amount of people you have working on something, just throwing people at a problem isn't a solution to anything. So really tracking labor is one that you got to look at every level. And I've been a part of that in my experience. That's why Apex is here. I mean, we're here to not add overhead, right? It's a different line item on the expenses. So that's an area where if you can look at that, and I don't want to take, I'm not obviously, I mean, the taking the jobs away, everyone's got to work. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, that's why I do what I do. I mean, I love what I do, but with that being said, I mean, just keeping an eye on that and making sure you're not overextending yourself. Because you mentioned earlier, like you can go get a new piece of property and open up a tap room. Like that's something that you can go do and be nimble and you can get out there in front. But if you overstaff it with too many people, I mean, that money that you're going to make is just going to keep going down and down and down. So Jeremy's point, having the data to make sure that you're not just looking at the overall sales, but you're looking at each person that comes in there. It's the same way when you're in the brewery, like making sure everything's efficient as much as possible, at least the amount of touch points. All that, all those are factors that you can control. You got to have someone looking at it at every level. It can't be, it's not one person's responsibility, it's everybody's.
Yeah, and I think that's really it kind of drives home to a larger point that what you're able to control. Take for example, as you were mentioning, the amount of people that you're staffing your tap room with. Don't over leverage yourself, don't overextend yourself. And you take one thing, we've talked about being nimble, critical. We've talked about planning, critical. We've talked about understanding your business, having all the data, having it easy to use, critical. But when you make decisions, commit only so far as you're not putting the entire business at risk because your first responsibility is to keep the lights on. And what's really changed in an uncertain environment more than anything isn't the size of the rope you're being asked to tightrope on. It's the size of the net. So your ability to recover from mistakes is really the biggest variable that changes in an uncertain environment. The rest of it's actually not as different as it probably feels like. So hedge on the side of caution, but don't turtle. Take advantage, approach this like a business, approach this like a time for growth and opportunity. Just be mindful of the fact that you don't want to stick your neck so far out that you fall over the edge entirely.
Yeah, and I want to echo on that point. That's a huge one. There's this thought of opening something new, whether it's a brewery or anything in business. You open something new and you want to surround yourself with the best people, and you're gonna spend money on the C-suite, and you're gonna spend money on all these managers and director level employees, and it's gonna cost you a fortune. That may not be the best. I'm not gonna say it may not. It's probably not the best use of your money to start because you get locked into that, it's hard to get out of. And it dwindles, it hurts the bottom line pretty quickly when you do that. So take advantage of companies like I have that Jeremy has, where you can go out and use that fractional support to not necessarily like test the market, but but you can accomplish so much without over leveraging yourself. I think the cost analysis of doing a consultant or advisor, you've done it too, Aaron. It's like pennies on the dollar compared to hiring a huge team. So that's where you can really like save some money. And then as you grow and graduate to a certain point, that's when you look at building out a staff.
I've never met a consultant who doesn't truly believe in building their clients' business to the point where they are no longer needed and they can in-house it. But the biggest thing about labor, to your point, Ryan, is that it's a commitment. And, if we keep coming back to the point of plan but be nimble, commitments and labor is one of the hardest ones. And again, I say that as a member of a senior leadership team. So thank you for calling us out as a big line item, Ryan. That
I've
is a
been in that
huge
place. I get
commitment.
it.
So so the more you're able to be flexible, the more critical that is. But we're coming up on time here. I do want to say anybody who has any additional questions, please do not hesitate to go ahead and reach out to any of us individually. But before I go ahead and tell you where you can find me, Ryan, Jeremy, let's go ahead and let them know where they can find you if they want to learn more about Apex Group 360, about Central Coast Analytics. Ryan, go ahead, kick us off.
Yeah, so apexgroup360.com is the best place to go. You can see everything. You can see what we do on there, all the services we offer. There's a way to contact me. You can see my cell phone numbers on there. My email address is on there. There's a book now, so you can schedule a meeting with me and the team. We've got a pretty large team. We're up to, like I said earlier, we have 11 consultants, multiple business partners that we work with. We want to help brands succeed. We want to help all beverage brands grow. Um, it's an industry I love, and I want to support it every way I can. And that's why I do what I do.
Fantastic. No, thank you for that. And Jeremy, how about yourself?
Cool. Yeah. So people can reach me at Jeremy at centralcoast-analytics.com, and that's my website as well. I'm also on LinkedIn. I try to stay relatively active on there, so please reach out. I'm always interested in talking about how breweries are using data today, whether it's going good or bad or somewhere in between, and giving them insights on what I've seen with other breweries that might be able to help them out. And a lot of it really is, like we've talked about here, is free up people's time to do what they're good at, and let the systems handle kind of that nasty work. Everybody kind of agrees that they need to get data and insights. You can either get that from, spending 8 hours a week crunching spreadsheets, or you can get it by using some of these modern platforms that do all the data work for you and they just display the insights to you. So I think there's a huge opportunity in this space and would love to chat to anybody about it further.
Absolutely. Thank you again, guys, for being on here. And for anybody who'd like to hear about Beer 30 in general, or a free, fully integrated command center for all of our customers, or even just to say hello, please go ahead and reach on out to me at aaron.gore. That's aaron.gore at thefifthingredient.com, or any of these social media links on the side here. Look forward to hearing it from everybody. Thank you again for tuning in, and we shall see you next month for our next webinar. Got some interesting conversation about cannabis beverages coming up, as well as some more talk about the importance of working directly with your wholesalers, ordering portals, group purchasing organizations, and more. Cheers.
Bye, everybody.